Yes, thank you very much. Thank you for the invitation and for organizing this day, which looks extremely interesting. I'm very keen to hear the other contributions and see where this can go. As promised, I will speak in English. Parlo anche italiano, quindi se avete le domande potete usarle in italiano, non c'è un problema per me. But since we agreed to be in English, I will continue with that for now. So yes, as you know, I'm going to speak today about the ESCRIPTORIUM. I say ESCRIPTORIUM, usually this is a shorthand for ESCRIPTORIUM and KRAKEN, which are two joint projects taking place at the École Pratique et Hautes Études University PSL, Paris Sciences et Lettres. And of course, as always in these projects, I am just one person in a large group. So many thanks to many colleagues, just a couple of whom are mentioned here, particularly Robin Tissot and Benjamin Kiesling, but many others as well. So I'm assuming you're fairly familiar with HTR and what this is. That's the subject of the day, but I'll run very, very quickly through ESCRIPTORIUM a bit just to show you a little bit how it works, and then talk a bit more about the background of the project, the uses that's been put to in practice, and some of the broader context, which I think might help to explain some of the decisions that we took while we were making it. I'm aware the focus today is primarily on Western medieval documents, but as you will see, our scope is much, much larger than that, and that has some important implications, I think, for what we are doing. So, KRAKEN ESCRIPTORIUM, just to explain very quickly, what is the difference? KRAKEN is the work of my colleague Benjamin Kiesling primarily, which is the core HTR engine, the artificial intelligence, if you like, the machine learning part, which can be run entirely on its own. And there are many people, I'm sure, here today who are doing exactly that. We have then built ESCRIPTORIUM, which is a web interface that goes on top of KRAKEN. Because to use KRAKEN, you have to sit there on the command line, typing commands and programs and things, which is very good for some people, but not for everybody. And so that's why we added ESCRIPTORIUM on top of that. And this is still very much in progress, but it is also available and being used by a large number of people at the moment, as we'll see in a bit. And a couple of the key points for us, we want it to be truly free and open. And by that, we mean the software that you can take ESCRIPTORIUM and KRAKEN and you can run them on your computer at your institution or even your home if you really want. And that has implications again for the design, particularly for working at large scale and training models. And also, I think this is standard, but it's not necessarily easy, that we want it to be useful and usable for humanities researchers, including those who don't have experience in programming and so on, which means there needs to be a lot of engineering. And that is not easy because that requires money, which is not easy to get for things that are not seen as research. So the basic workflow, this is standard for all HTR. I'm sure you're familiar with it, but just to run through very quickly, we assume you have images of your documents. You want to get them into the system. You then need to segment your images. In other words, find the text, find the different regions on the page, maybe correct and retrain the machine learning system, depending on your documents. And then normally you want transcription, of course, that's what we're talking about today. So that might be typing out by hand to begin with. It might be importing a transcription that you have already from somewhere else and perhaps then correcting it. It might be an automatic transcription, then perhaps correcting that, and almost certainly repeating, iterating over and over to improve your results. And at the end, most likely, you would want to get your text out again to use in your edition or whatever it is you're doing. But also for us, we assume you might want to get your trained models, the sort of machine learning brain, if you like, out and use them elsewhere as well. What does it look like in practice? I'll just very quickly show you a few videos. Some of these are a bit old, including this one, but it's basically the same. There's not a lot of difference. So here to create a new document, I can go in, I type the name, I have a long list of scripts I can choose from and directions. I'm just going to do a Latin one from here. And then if I want to import the images, one of the easiest ways, if my image is available by IIIF, then I can use that. If you don't know IIIF, this is an international standard for sharing images among different institutions. So I get my URL here, and I can go to any IIIF source. So I'm going to Biblissima, which has no direct connection with ESCRIPTORIUM, where they have, it's now over 80,000 manuscripts from all these different libraries, as you can see. I search for my manuscript, Opus 201, I find it, and I simply take my icon, drag it over, start importing, and after a while, I'm doing this in fast forward, as you can see, we start getting our images. So in this way, the 280 images of the manuscript get imported directly into eScriptorium without me having to download them, upload them, and all the rest. Once I've done that, we are hoping to improve this interface, but just to give you a bit of a look, we have the images here, and we can now go in, I can do my automatic segmentation to find the lines of text and so on. And then I can see my image and see different versions. Here's my image with the automatic line detection. The results are actually significantly better now, but just to show you what it looks like. And I can see different panels, which I'll come back to in a bit. And I can do things like correct if I need to, the automatic segmentation, and then retrain the model based on my particular manuscript. So here, for instance, there are two different lines where it should have been only one line. Again, now that wouldn't happen with later versions, but anyway, I can just join those two lines together and fix up little details and things, so on and so forth. Once I have that, I can then go, so it's the same video again, isn't it? Yep. Yeah, I can now go in and actually start doing my transcription. So I can, from this interface, for instance, I can select a line and type it out by hand if I don't have it already. What standard for transcription I use, that's up to me to decide. And this, in fact, is a big and complicated question, but I'll come back to that in a second. The point is that I can, if I want, type here, or I might have, for instance, a transcription already in text from somewhere else, which I can copy and paste, or if I have it in XML, I can import it directly and then go and, for instance, correct the transcription to make it the way I want, or to fit it to my manuscript, whatever it is. So again, this is relatively standard, but the idea is to have a nice, useful interface. To show you things a little bit different, as I'll say in a minute, we have colleagues working in many, many different languages. So here is an example in Chinese. This model is not so good yet for Chinese, but you can see how it works with the vertical script. You've got some of the line directions a little bit wrong, so we can swap those and play around with the order. And then, I have my vertical interface for my writing from top to bottom in these Chinese documents. Some of our documents are extremely complex. So for us, this is very important. Things like the page layout and being able to handle very complex layouts. Again, I'm showing Arabic here, but I'm sure you have similar, or maybe not similar, but equally complex documents in medieval charters, for instance. So we've spent a lot of time engineering the interface to be able to account for these different layouts as much as possible. Here, the line detection is manual, it's not automatic, but now it can be done automatically. And then it will fix the orientation, allow me to read the text the right way up and to edit it, and so on as I wish. Skipping ahead again, a similar example in Hebrew in this case. But here we have many different, or several different transcriptions, most of which are automatic. So I can test different automatic transcriptions with different trained models, see the results, go in and then do things like compare. And skip ahead a bit. Yeah, here we go. So we're comparing different versions and different states in the history of the document to see what they look like. So again, I'm going very quickly, but just to give you a bit of an idea of what's possible. Of course, there's much more than this as well. Here again, there's manual and automatic transcriptions. And I can go in and select the different levels that I want, compare them, see which model worked the best, which has been changed, perhaps what my colleagues have corrected, and verify the differences and so forth. So trying to show you here some of the ergonomy, the usability that we've been trying to put in place to produce tools, because a lot of these complex documents, there aren't tools at the moment that really allow people to work with them in useful ways and in sort of fluent and usable ways. And this is something that my colleagues, at least, and I have the impression others as well, are very, very much looking for. So on the one hand, our interest is on the automatic transcription, absolutely. But as I'm sure you know, we will see, the automatic transcription even then requires a lot of effort to produce material to train the document. And to do that, we also need useful interfaces and ways of interacting and producing this sort of material. Just a quick show, a few other examples of some results. And this is my colleague, Daniel Stokes and others working on Dead Sea Scrolls. This is quite old now, but still, I personally don't read Hebrew, but I am assured that this is a very, very precise transcription, given the difficulty of the image, which, as you can see, is not straightforward at all. Here, just a quick example in Syriac, and a little bit of some of the other things. This, again, I believe, is a fully automatic transcription. Here, another colleague, this in fact is a student working on Old Javanese. For her, she had a very, very wide variety of documents. So the automatic recognition is probably not going to be very useful, but she is using it as a simple transcription tool for her edition because she found the interface very effective and useful. So you do your transcription, you can retrain your model like any other system to get more and more accurate transcriptions automatically. But again, one of the things that's very important for us is then that you have control of your model and you can use it and work with it. So here we have an example. These ones are all for Hebrew, I think. As you can see, they're getting very good results, 98, 99%, even higher for different manuscripts in Hebrew. So this is the result of the training. And then I can download that. I can export that. If you have set up ESCRIPTORIUM or Kraken on your own computer, I can send you the models. I can send you the different content. So to us, again, this is crucial, partly because it's fair in a sense. You've done the work, you should be able to. It's scientifically important, we think, to be able to share results, but it's also efficient. Otherwise, we're retraining over and over and over. Machine learning, which we have to accept, is very environmentally damaging. It takes a lot of energy, a lot of resources. So the more we can minimize that, the better. And in 2 years' time, if ESCRIPTORIUM goes bankrupt, or if for some reason we decide, I don't know, we have to start charging for access or whatever, you still have the possibility of getting not just your data, but also your models, all your work out of the system and using it elsewhere. So for sustainability of your project as well, we think this is very important. For that reason, we've set up a Zinode repository to share, and it's not obligatory, but it's strongly encouraged to post your models there, and people are starting to do that more and more, which again is something we're very keen on. But so we had the export and interchange, so you can import and export models, TEI, Alto and Page. TEI is quite complicated actually, but we're still working on that certainly, so that you can reduce the load. You're not tied exclusively to ESCRIPTORIUM. But this does lead directly to quite complex and I think interesting questions, because if you are reusing my models, then that means you must have more or less the same transcription practices as I do. And as we know very well in practice, that's usually not the case. There are many, many different standards, many different approaches to transcription. So it's all very well, and I think good and useful to say we are sharing our material. But what does it really mean to interchange content? And this is something the TEI has been talking about for 20 years. The I in TEI can mean interchange. There are slightly different interpretations of that. But one thing we found is that true interchange of humanities, medieval documents and texts and so on is extremely complicated because there is no sufficiently precise standard or model. So to talk about that a little more, these are just some of the teams using eScriptorium in Chinese, Old Vietnamese, Arabic, Hebrew, Syriac, Latin, Greek, across all different periods, up to the 19th, even 20th century French. Trying to get everyone to agree on one standard, I think makes no sense actually, because we're all doing different things, working with different types of documents. I think it's also important to emphasize that eScriptorium began as part of the Scriptor PSL project, which is a whole other story. I don't want to get into the details. The point is that the languages that my colleagues, and therefore we, have to allow for is enormous, and the range of scripts is enormous. And so that also just it sort of stands behind some of the reasons that we did certain things that we did. For instance, I think somebody else, perhaps next, is going to talk about language models afterwards. And yes, language models, absolutely, they're extremely useful and very important. But we can't do that because there's no way we can come up with language models for all of these different languages. So yes, you can take eScriptorium and use your language models afterwards. That's a very good idea. But it's not something that we can put into eScriptorium for you, just to give one example. So a few other challenges of rare and diverse writing. There are all the questions of Unicode and fonts and so on. Just the question of direction is a real mess. Is it left to right, right to left, top to bottom, then right to left, top to bottom, then left to right, bottom to top? Do you write on a baseline? Do you write from a baseline? And how do I share my transcription with you if I do my line analysis on a baseline and you do your line analysis on a top line? Then our models, our transcriptions are no longer compatible. Never mind the fact that, okay, medieval Latin is not too bad, but if you're working in Tocharian or whatever, then you might only have a handful of documents anyway, which makes it very difficult to train machine learning and so on. In fact, Google is very interested in what we are doing because Google, their methods don't work. They assume you have billions and billions of pages and billions of words. And again, if you're working in Old Le or something, that just doesn't exist. So you need to find new methods and new approaches. Very quickly, a few of the more interesting examples. Here is a combined Hebrew-Chinese manuscript. And this is not yet automatic, unfortunately, but is something I am using as a test case. We would like to be able to treat a document like this fully automatically. Line direction, everyone says this is easy. In fact, it's not. It's really very complicated. Here are just some examples of the different cases that we have to deal with. Not to mention some of the more interesting ones. We just saw the Chinese Hebrew, micrography, Egyptian hieroglyphics. I don't know if we'll ever be able to get to that point, but ideally this is where we would like to go in the longer term. So as I've already mentioned this, again, I'm aware that I'm running out of time, and I'm sort of showing this text so you can come back and see them later in the video. But just to mention that there are some other projects which we are connected to, but we are not leading, particularly the École des Chartes in Paris and Simon Gabay in Geneva and some others, including some of you who I know are here today, doing things like trying to work on agreed standards, at least for those of us working on, say, medieval or late medieval manuscripts or documents or whatever. At least if we can agree amongst ourselves and come up with standards for using an interchange, then that's a good start. It's probably too ambitious to include everyone. A similar sort of project, HTR United, again, mainly by French colleagues, but there are many other examples as well, such as the OCRD in Germany. So the idea is once we have all these standards in place, or at least these common practices in place, then it will be much more useful to be able to share the models and ground truth, the material that we've prepared for training and so on, and at least be able to understand where we're going there. I do think, though, just to finish, that there is a big challenge behind that. And here I like very much the words of Armando Petrucci, writing about polygraphical terminology, which seems very different, but I think actually is very relevant to the digital humanities in general. And as you can see, the key point, I think, there is that there are and there always will be different points of view, and there have to be different points of view. That's the whole point of research. But that makes it difficult, perhaps even impossible, to have everybody doing the same thing. There's a real contrast, real tension there between the computing, which wants everything standard and the same, and humanities research, which wants everything varied and different. I would say needs on both sides. And how we put those two together is a much more complicated question. So I will stop there. There are some links just for the video, or I can send them to you as well. But thank you very much for listening.